When did you realize your parents considered you a mistake? My mom and stepdad have always hated me, because I look exactly like my bio dad, aka my mom's worst enemy. So when I was sitting in math class and felt a shooting pain in the lower right side of my abdomen, the last thing I wanted to do was call them. But after I felt my forehead burning up, I knew I had to give in and text the family group chat. It took them 30 minutes to collect me. "Were you trying to skip school?" was the first thing my stepdad asked when I got in the car. Before I could respond, my sister cranked the aux all the way up. "What are you even doing here?" I managed to ask. "We were having a family bonding day," she beamed. "That you interrupted?" My mom scoffed. The pain in my stomach moved from sharp to explosive, like my insides were being torched. Mom turned around from the front seat, her eyes narrowing the way they always did when she looked at me. "You better not be doing this for attention." My skin was gray, drenched in sweat that wouldn't stop pouring. Every bump in the road sent lightning through my abdomen. That's when I started throwing up. Mark handed back a grocery bag without even looking, like he'd been expecting it. "My gosh," he muttered. "Your father used to pull this same dramatic BS." That's when Kendra's phone beeped with an alert. Her phone was on 5%. "My phone is dying!" she wailed. This wasn't just regular upset. It was that calculated crying she'd perfected since she was 6. "Josh is gonna FaceTime me in literally 20 minutes, and he'll think I'm ignoring him, and then he'll ask that girl from chemistry to homecoming instead of me." I could feel something inside me getting worse with every second. "Hospital," I gasped. "Please." Mom and Mark exchanged that look. The same look from when I asked if I could join the family vacation to Disney. The same look from when I asked why Kendra got a car for her 16th birthday, but I got a card with $20. "There's a Best Buy right there," Mom said, pointing at the blue sign coming up on the right. "We can grab her a portable charger real quick." I thought I'd misheard her. Through the fog of pain and nausea, I managed to lift my head. "What?" "It'll just take a second," she said, already telling Mark to turn in. "Please, number—" The words barely came out. My throat felt like it was closing. Mark looked at me in the rearview mirror with this expression of pure disgust. "Stop being dramatic just like your dad always was. 5 minutes won't kill you." They didn't even hesitate. Mom opened her door. Kendra bounced out, still wailing about Josh, and Mark locked the car with me inside like I was a dog instead of their son. The pain had changed from sharp to something else, like pressure building up with nowhere to go. That's when I felt it, like a water balloon popping inside me. But instead of relief, there was just wrongness. Fire spread through my belly, up into my chest. I knew what had happened. Even at 16, even without medical training, your body tells you when something has ruptured, when something that's supposed to be contained isn't anymore. I tried to call an ambulance, but my hand wouldn't hold still to type in the numbers. Through the shop window, I could see Mom holding 2 different chargers, comparing them. Kendra was looking at phone cases. Mark was checking his watch, not because he was worried about me, but because the game started at 4. The last thing I heard before blacking out was the car door opening. "Mark, is he breathing?" Mom checked. "Yeah, but we have to go now." Kendra, "But I haven't charged my phone yet." I woke up 3 days later in the ICU. Through the haze of medications, I could hear my mom's voice in the hallway, that fake, concerned tone she used at parent-teacher conferences. "We rushed here the second we realized something was wrong," she was telling someone. "We only stopped for 2 minutes because Kendra has severe anxiety and needed her medication from the pharmacy." The nurse was eating it up. "You poor things. It must have been so scary." Mark chimed in. "We've been here every day." Haven't left his side. That's when I knew. If I wanted justice, I'd have to get it myself. And I knew exactly how to do it. I opened our family group chat and typed, "Thank you for saving my life, Mom." Then I hit send on something else. The message wasn't to my family. It was to my bio dad, whose number I'd found in Mom's old phone 6 months ago and saved under a fake contact name just in case. My fingers shook as I typed on the screen, each word harder than the last, because the pain meds were already pulling me back under. I almost died because Mom wouldn't take me to the hospital. "I'm in ICU. Please help." I hit send and watched the message turn blue before my eyes got too heavy to keep open. The phone slipped from my hand onto the blanket, and everything went dark again. When I woke up, the room was dim, just one light over the sink, glowing yellow. A guy in dark blue scrubs stood next to my bed doing something with the machines. He had kind eyes and a name tag that said Ty. He noticed me staring and smiled a little. "Hey, you're awake. How are you feeling?" Most people ask that as a greeting, not expecting a real answer, but Ty just stood there waiting, actually looking at me like my answer mattered. "Everything hurts," I said, my voice coming out scratchy and weak, "and I'm scared to go home." His expression changed right then. Not shocked exactly, more like something clicked into place. He pulled up the chair next to my bed and sat down so we were at eye level. "Can I ask you some questions about that?" I nodded. My throat felt tight, but I needed someone to know. The hospital takes patient safety really seriously, Ty said quietly. Would it be okay if I requested a social work consult for you? Someone who can help make sure you're safe and have what you need? Relief hit me so hard I almost started crying again. Someone actually cared enough to do something. Yes, I managed to say. Please. Ty squeezed my hand for just a second, then stood up and made some notes on his computer tablet. I'm putting that request in right now. Someone will come talk to you tomorrow morning. He checked my IV and adjusted something that made the aching in my stomach ease up a tiny bit. Try to get some rest. I'll be here all night if you need anything. I fell back asleep feeling safer than I had in years. The next morning, a woman with dark hair pulled back in a bun came into my room carrying a tablet and wearing a gentle smile. Her badge said, Valerie Burns, Social Services. She pulled the chair close to my bed and sat down. Good morning. I'm Valerie. The nursing staff asked me to come check on you and see how you're doing. Her voice was warm but professional, the kind that made you feel like you could tell her anything. Can you walk me through what happened before you got to the hospital? I told her everything. About texting the family group chat from math class when the pain started, about waiting 30 minutes for them to pick me up, about Mark asking if I was trying to skip school, about Kendra's phone dying and Mom deciding to stop at Best Buy for a charger while I was throwing up in the back seat, about them locking me in the car while they shopped, about feeling my appendix rupture and not being able to call for help. Valerie's face stayed calm and kind the whole time, but her fingers moved fast across her tablet, taking notes on everything I said. When I finished, she looked up at me with those kind eyes. The medical team documented your condition when you arrived. You had critical sepsis from a ruptured appendix, which means there was a significant delay in getting you treatment. She paused, then asked the question that mattered most. Do you feel safe going home? I wanted to say no so badly it hurt worse than my incision. But I also knew what happened to kids who said they weren't safe at home. Foster care, maybe. Or forced family therapy where Mom would blame me for everything. I don't know, I said finally, which was at least honest. Valerie nodded like that answer told her everything she needed. This information will be part of my assessment. I'll be working with your medical team, and we'll figure out the best plan for you. She stood up, but left her business card on the table next to my bed. If you need anything or remember something else you want to tell me, you can call that number anytime. After she left, I picked up my phone to check the time. That's when I saw the notification. A text from the contact I'd saved as Dave from the school, but was really my bio dad. I'm driving there now. 2 states away, but I'll be there by tomorrow morning. Are you okay? Please tell me you're okay. I started crying before I could stop myself. Someone who barely knew me, who Mom had kept away from me my whole life, was dropping everything and driving through the night to get to me. Meanwhile, my own mother was probably at home watching her cooking shows and complaining about how I'd ruined her week. The tears kept coming and I couldn't make them stop. A different nurse came in to check on me and asked if I was in pain. I just shook my head, because how could I explain that these were relief tears? The kind that come when you realize you're not as alone as you thought you were. That afternoon, I heard Mom's voice in the hallway before I saw her. That fake sweet tone she used with teachers and doctors, the one that made everyone think she was Mother of the Year. Mark's deeper voice rumbled something I couldn't make out. Then they walked in with Kendra trailing behind them, her eyes on her phone like always. Mom had her concerned parent face on, eyebrows drawn together and mouth turned down. But the second she saw Valerie's business card sitting on my bedside table, her whole expression changed. Her eyes went hard and her jaw got tight. She picked up the card and read it, then looked at me with that expression I knew too well, the one that said I'd done something wrong just by existing. What's this about? Her voice came out sharp despite her trying to sound casual. Mark stood behind her with his arms crossed, already looking annoyed. I kept my face neutral and my voice even. A social worker is helping coordinate my discharge care, making sure I have what I need when I leave the hospital. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Mark's jaw clenched, and a muscle jumped in his cheek. Mom's eyes narrowed, but she couldn't make a scene because a nurse walked past right then, glancing into the room. She forced a smile and sat down in the chair Valerie had used earlier. Well, that's nice of them. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. Kendra hadn't looked up from her phone once. She stood near the door like she wanted to be anywhere else, her thumb scrolling and scrolling. I wondered if Josh ever called her for that FaceTime, or if she'd been worried about nothing while I was literally dying in a parking lot. Dr. Angelo Burns came in during what Mom called evening visiting hours, even though I hadn't asked them to visit at all. He was the surgeon who'd operated on me, tall with gray at his temples and tired eyes that had probably seen too many emergency cases. He pulled up my chart on the computer and started reviewing my recovery progress, talking mostly to himself while he read. Then he said something that made the whole room go still. The surgical notes indicate your appendix had been ruptured for at least 2 hours before you arrived at the hospital. He looked up from the screen, his gaze moving between me and my parents. How long were you experiencing symptoms before you came in? This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for since I woke up and heard Mom lying to the nurses in the hallway. I kept my voice calm and clear, making sure every word came out right. I texted them from the school when the pain started. It took 30 minutes for them to pick me up. Then I asked to go to the hospital, but we stopped at Best Buy first, so Kendra could get a phone charger. They locked me in the car while they shopped. That's when my appendix ruptured. I watched Mom's face while I talked, saw the color drain out of it, then come flooding back red and angry. Mark's hands balled into fists at his sides. Kendra finally looked up from her phone, her eyes wide. Dr. Burns's expression stayed professionally neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. He made additional notes in my chart, his fingers clicking on the keyboard for a long time. "I'll be coordinating with social services regarding your case," he said, still typing. Then he left without saying anything else to my parents. The silence after he walked out felt like a living thing, heavy and dangerous. Mom opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but another nurse came in to check my vitals. Mark grabbed Mom's arm and pulled her toward the door, muttering something about getting coffee. Kendra followed them without a word, but right before she left, she glanced back at me. For just a second, her face looked different, guilty maybe, or scared. Then she was gone, and I was alone again with the machines beeping and my heart pounding, and the knowledge that I'd just set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. The machines beeped their steady rhythm while I stared at the ceiling tiles and counted the tiny holes in each square. My whole body felt heavy from the medications dripping through my IV, but my brain wouldn't shut off. Around 9 that evening, Ty came back on duty and stopped by my room to check my vitals. He moved quietly around the bed, adjusting things and writing notes on his tablet. When he finished, he pulled up the chair Valerie had used earlier and sat down like he had something important to say. He told me that he'd talked to the other nurses and the doctors, and they'd all put notes in my file about the delay getting me to the hospital. He said the emergency room staff had documented my condition when I arrived, how bad the infection was, how close I'd come to dying. His voice stayed calm and professional, but his eyes looked sad when he said multiple people were worried about what happened to me. He explained that in cases like mine, where there were questions about how a kid got hurt, the hospital staff paid attention and wrote everything down. Then he said something that made my throat tight. He told me I had people looking out for me now, people who cared about making sure I stayed safe. He said that mattered more than I probably realized, and he squeezed my shoulder gently before heading back to the nurses' station. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom comparing phone chargers while my appendix ruptured. I kept checking my phone to see if Bio-Dad had responded again, but there was nothing new. Part of me wondered if he'd actually come, or if he'd decide I wasn't worth the trouble, just like Mom always said. Morning came slowly, the sky outside my window turning from black to gray to pale blue. Around 7, a nurse brought me breakfast that I couldn't eat because my stomach was still messed up from the surgery. I was picking at some plain toast when I heard voices in the hallway, and then the door opened. The man who walked in was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that had some gray at the sides. He looked exhausted, like he'd been driving all night without stopping and his clothes were wrinkled. But his face was like looking in a mirror 20 years from now. Same nose, same jawline, same dark eyes that Mom always said made her sick to look at. He stopped just inside the doorway and stared at me, his eyes getting wet. Then he crossed the room in 3 long steps and hugged me carefully, his arms going around me, but avoiding all the tubes and wires. His voice cracked when he asked if I was really okay, and I couldn't answer because I was crying too hard. He smelled like coffee and the highway, and his hands were shaking when he pulled back to look at my face. He kept saying he was sorry, over and over. Sorry he hadn't been there. Sorry he hadn't known how bad things were. Sorry he'd let so much time pass. We talked for almost 2 hours straight. He pulled the chair right up next to my bed and held my hand while he explained everything. He told me about how he and Mom had met in college, how things fell apart after I was born, how she'd blamed him for everything wrong in her life. He said she'd filed for full custody and told the judge he was dangerous, that he'd hurt her. All lies that he couldn't prove were false. The court gave her custody, and he got supervised visitation once a month, but then she moved 3 states away without telling him. By the time he found out where we'd gone, she'd filed papers saying he'd abandoned me, and the new court terminated his rights. But here's the thing that made my chest feel like it was caving in. He pulled out his phone and showed me bank statements going back 16 years. Every single month, he'd sent child support payments, not to Mom directly, but through the state system that was supposed to forward the money. Every month for my entire life, he'd been sending money that Mom told me he never paid. She'd bought Kendra a car with money that was supposed to be for me. She'd taken family vacations and left me home with money that was supposed to feed me. I stared at those bank statements and realized my whole life had been built on lies. He showed me letters too, dozens of them, that he'd sent to Mom's address asking to see me. She'd never responded to a single one. He'd hired lawyers twice to try to get visitation rights back, but without proof of the lies, the courts wouldn't help him. He said finding me had been like finding a part of himself he thought was gone forever. Valerie came back around mid-morning and asked to speak with Bio-Dad privately. They left together, and I sat alone with my thoughts for 40 minutes that felt like hours. I could hear their voices in the hallway sometimes, serious and low. When they finally came back, Bio-Dad's whole posture had changed. He stood straighter, his jaw set in this determined way that reminded me of how I'd felt when I decided to tell Dr. Burns the truth. Valerie sat down and explained in her calm, professional voice that she and Bio-Dad had discussed options for my living situation after discharge. She said, given the documented concerns about the delay in my medical care and the questions about my safety at home, she was recommending that I not return to Mom's house right away. Bio-Dad had agreed to stay in town, and she was going to arrange for him to be my temporary guardian during my recovery. She used words like home evaluation and child protective services and family court, and each one felt like another brick in the wall I was building between me and Mom. Valerie said a CPS investigator would need to visit Mom's house and interview everyone, and that process would take some time. She promised she'd make sure I was safe while everything got sorted out, and the way she said it made me believe her. Bio-Dad reached over and took my hand again, and I held on tight. Mom showed up for afternoon visiting hours and found Bio-Dad sitting next to my bed. I watched her face go through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, then anger, then this fake pleasant look she used when other people were watching. She asked what he was doing here in this sweet voice that didn't match her eyes at all. Bio-Dad stood up and said he was visiting his son, and Mom's fake pleasant expression cracked. She started yelling about how he had no rights, how he'd abandoned me, how dare he show up now. Bio-Dad's voice stayed level when he pointed out that he'd been paying child support for 16 years and had bank statements to prove it. Mom's face went red, and she screamed that he was a liar, that the courts had terminated his rights, that she'd call security. 2 security guards actually did show up then, but not to remove Bio-Dad. They asked both of them to come to a private conference room to discuss things away from patient areas. Mom looked like she wanted to argue, but the guards weren't asking. They escorted both my parents out, leaving me alone with Mark and Kendra. The silence felt thick and uncomfortable. Mark stood by the window with his arms crossed, not looking at me. Kendra stayed near the door, her thumb scrolling on her phone like always. But then she glanced up, and our eyes met for just a second. Her voice came out quiet and small when she said she was sorry. She didn't look up from her phone when she said it, and I didn't know if she meant sorry for the Best Buy stop or sorry for 16 years of watching them treat me like garbage. Maybe both, maybe neither. Mark didn't say anything at all. 3 days crawled by with Bio-Dad staying at a hotel nearby and visiting every day during allowed hours. The doctors watched my recovery closely, checking my incision and blood work and making sure the infection was clearing up. Dr. Burns came by on the 4th day after I'd woken up and said I was healing well enough to go home. He gave me a whole list of instructions about wound care, keeping the incision clean and dry, watching for signs of infection. He wrote prescriptions for pain medication and antibiotics and explained the activity restrictions. No heavy lifting, no running or jumping, no gym class for at least 4 weeks. He talked about diet too, starting with small, bland meals and slowly adding foods back in. Then Valerie showed up with discharge papers and a plan. She'd arranged everything with Bio-Dad and the hospital social work department. Instead of going back to Mom's house, I'd be staying with Bio-Dad at his hotel for now. She said it was about making sure I got proper post-surgical care and supervision during recovery, but we all knew it was about keeping me away from Mom. She used official words like adequate support and medical supervision needs, writing everything down in her reports. Mom would get copies of all the paperwork, Valerie explained, and she'd have the right to object through proper legal channels. But for now, this was what was happening. Mom did object, loudly and immediately. She showed up as I was getting dressed to leave and started threatening legal action. She said Bio-Dad had no custody rights, that she'd sue the hospital, that she'd call the police. Bio-Dad stayed completely calm while she yelled. His voice came out steady and reasonable when he pointed out that he'd been paying child support for 16 years without any visitation, that he had legitimate concerns about my safety based on what happened, and that the hospital social worker's report supported his position. He said the medical documentation showing the delay in treatment was pretty clear, and maybe she should talk to her lawyer before making threats. Mom's face went purple, and she looked like she might actually hit him. A nurse stepped between them and suggested Mom leave before security got involved again. Mark pulled her toward the door while she kept yelling about how this wasn't over, how she'd fight this, how I was manipulated. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed in the clothes bio Dad had brought me and watched my mother walk away, still screaming. Kendra trailed behind them, looking at the floor. The hotel room bio Dad had rented wasn't fancy, but it was clean and quiet. 2 double beds with blue comforters, a small table by the window, a TV mounted on the wall. He'd already been there that morning and stocked the mini fridge with ginger ale and crackers and plain bread, all things Valerie had said would be easy on my stomach. He helped me get settled on the bed closest to the bathroom, propping pillows behind me and making sure I was comfortable. Then he set up all my medications on the nightstand with his phone alarm system, programming in reminders for each dose. He asked what I wanted to watch on TV and handed me the remote, telling me to pick anything. We ended up watching some cooking competition show that neither of us cared about, but it didn't matter. What mattered was him checking on me every 20 minutes, asking if I needed anything, if I was in pain, if I was hungry. What mattered was him getting up to grab me more ginger ale without me having to ask. What mattered was the way he adjusted my pillows when he saw me shifting around trying to get comfortable. For the first time in 16 years, someone was taking care of me like I actually mattered. I fell asleep that afternoon feeling safer than I'd ever felt at home. Kian showed up that evening with a backpack full of homework assignments and gossip from the school. Bio Dad let him in and they shook hands, Kian looking a little nervous meeting my actual father for the first time. I was sitting up in bed with my laptop, trying to catch up on some reading for English class. Kian dumped his backpack on the other bed and started pulling out folders and papers, explaining what I'd missed in each class. Then he stopped mid-sentence and looked between me and Bio Dad, who was helping me adjust my pillows again. Kian's eyes went wide, and he leaned closer to me, his voice dropping to a whisper. He asked if this was my actual dad, his tone full of surprise and something else, maybe relief. When I nodded, Kian's whole face broke into this huge grin. He said it was about damn time something good happened to me. Bio Dad laughed and offered to order pizza for dinner, asking Kian what toppings he liked. We spent the next 2 hours eating carefully bland food for me while they had pizza, Kian catching me up on all the school drama and treating the situation like it was completely normal. Like having my bio dad suddenly in my life wasn't this massive weird thing. His casual acceptance of it made everything feel more real and less scary. Valerie had suggested I keep a journal documenting everything during my recovery. She said it would help if there were any questions later about the level of care I was getting. So over the next few days, I wrote down everything. How bio dad checked my incision twice every day, looking for redness or swelling or any signs of infection. How he made sure I took my medications exactly on schedule, never letting me skip a dose even when I said I felt fine. How he made me small, bland meals even though they were boring, because that's what the doctor ordered. How he asked me constantly how I was feeling, if I needed anything, if the pain was getting worse. I wrote about him doing my laundry at the hotel laundromat and buying me new clothes because I'd only had what Mom packed. I documented him setting up a tutoring schedule so I wouldn't fall behind in the school and researching the best doctors for follow-up care. Every entry in that journal showed the same thing. Bio Dad treated me like I was important, like my health and safety and future actually mattered. The contrast to my entire life before was so sharp it hurt almost as much as the surgery had. Reading back through those entries, I could see exactly what Valerie had wanted me to see, the difference between neglect and actual parenting, written out in my own words that no one could argue with. A week later, a thick envelope arrived at the hotel addressed to Bio Dad. He opened it at the small desk while I was doing homework on my bed, and I watched his jaw tighten as he read. Mom's lawyer had sent a formal demand letter insisting I return home immediately, claiming Bio Dad had no legal right to keep me. Bio Dad made 3 phone calls that afternoon. His lawyer requested copies of all my medical records from the hospital, asked Valerie to write an official report about her concerns, and filed something called an emergency custody modification petition with the family court. 2 days after that, another letter came. This one had a court seal on it. The judge had ordered a temporary hearing in exactly 2 weeks to determine where I should live while the full custody case got sorted out. Bio Dad showed me the letter and asked if I was okay with this, if I really wanted to go through with legal action against my own mother. I looked at the journal on my nightstand, at the medication bottles he'd organized, at the mini fridge he kept stocked with safe foods for my recovering stomach. Then I looked at him and said yes. 3 weeks after my surgery, Bio Dad drove me back to my old school for the first time. My incision still pulled when I moved wrong and I got tired way faster than before. By third period, I was fighting to keep my eyes open in history class. The teacher noticed me nodding off and sent a note to the counselor's office. I'd never met Jasmine Ford before. She had an office near the front entrance with plants on every surface and a couch that looked actually comfortable instead of the usual hard plastic chairs. She asked me to sit down and offered me water, then waited until I was settled before asking how I was really doing. I tried to give her the standard answer about being fine and catching up on schoolwork. She just looked at me with this patient expression and said she'd gotten a report from my teacher about me falling asleep, and she knew I'd been hospitalized recently. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. She asked if I wanted to talk about what was going on. Something about the way she asked, without pushing or judging, made everything spill out. I told her about the appendix rupture and the Best Buy stop while I was dying in the back seat. I told her about waking up in the ICU and hearing Mom lie to the nurses about what happened. I told her about Bio-Dad showing up and how I'd never felt safer in my life than I did staying with him at that hotel. I told her about the custody battle starting and how scared I was that the judge might make me go back to Mom's house. Jasmine listened to everything without interrupting once. When I finally stopped talking, she was quiet for a minute. Then she explained that she was what's called a mandatory reporter, which meant if she heard about a child being hurt or neglected, she had to report it to the authorities. She asked if I would give her permission to write down everything I'd just told her and include it in the court case. I said yes immediately. Jasmine called Valerie that same day. I know because Valerie texted Bio-Dad about it that evening, saying it was really helpful to have school staff backing up her concerns. Having a counselor from my actual school confirm that I'd been neglected made the case way stronger. Jasmine also set up a bunch of accommodations for me. I got extra time on all my assignments until I was fully recovered. I got permission to leave any class if I was in pain and go to the nurse's office. I got a pass that let me arrive late to first period if I needed extra rest in the mornings. She printed everything out and gave me copies, then sent the same information to all my teachers. For the first time ever, school felt like a place that actually cared if I was okay. One afternoon, about a week later, I was at the hotel doing homework when someone knocked on the door. Bio-Dad was out getting groceries. I looked through the peephole and saw Kendra standing in the hallway. She looked terrible. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup, which never happened. I opened the door, and she just stood there for a second before asking if she could come in. We sat on opposite beds, and she stared at her hands. Then she said she'd been thinking about the Best Buy stop constantly, like every single day since it happened. She said she kept seeing me in the back seat turning gray while she cried about her phone charging. She said she realized I could have actually died while she was looking at phone cases. She looked up at me with red eyes and asked if I hated her. I didn't know how to answer that. Part of me wanted to say yes, to make her feel as bad as I'd felt my whole life. But another part of me knew she was 17 and had been raised by the same parents who taught her that her problems mattered more than my life. I told Kendra I was angry at all of them. At her for being so selfish, at Mom for hating me, at Mark for treating me like garbage. But I also told her I understood she was just a kid who'd been raised in a really messed up environment. I said Mom and Mark had spent our entire lives teaching her that she was more important than me, so of course she believed it. That wasn't totally her fault. Kendra started crying, but it wasn't her usual fake dramatic crying. These were real tears that made her face blotchy and her nose run. She said she wanted to tell the truth about what happened if it would help my case. She said she'd testify in court about the Best Buy stop and about how Mom and Mark had always treated me differently. I just nodded because I didn't trust myself to say anything else. A few days later, Bio-Dad took me to a follow-up appointment with Dr. Burns. The hospital was the same building where I'd almost died, and walking through those doors made my stomach clench. But Dr. Burns was really nice about checking my incision. He said it was healing well with no signs of infection. Then he had me step on a scale and his expression changed. He asked how much I'd weighed before the surgery. When I told him, he wrote something in my chart and said I was underweight for my height and age. He did some other checks, looking at my skin and nails and asking questions about how I'd been sleeping. Then he said I was showing signs of chronic stress and malnutrition. He added all of this to my medical file and mentioned it would be included in the reports going to the court. Bio-Dad asked if there was anything specific we should do, and Dr. Burns gave us a meal plan and some vitamin supplements. He scheduled another follow-up in 6 weeks. The CPS investigator showed up at Mom's house on a Tuesday afternoon. I know because Kendra texted me right after it happened. The investigator was a woman who interviewed each family member separately in different rooms. She talked to Mom first, then Mark, then Kendra. Kendra said the investigator asked really specific questions about the day I went to the hospital. She asked exactly how long we stopped at Best Buy. She asked if they'd noticed I was seriously sick. She asked how Mom and Mark usually treated me compared to Kendra. Kendra told her everything. She described the Best Buy stop in detail, including the part where I was throwing up in the car and they still went shopping. She talked about how I got a card with $20 for my birthday while she got a car. She explained how Mom and Mark always acted like I was a burden, and she was the favorite. The investigator took notes on everything. Her report came a week later. It said I had experienced medical neglect that could have resulted in death. It said there was a clear pattern of emotional abuse and differential treatment, It recommended I not return to Mom's house. Mom called me directly for the first time since I'd left the hospital. My phone rang while I was watching TV with Biodad, and her name popped up on the screen. My hand shook when I answered. Her voice was shaking too, but not with sadness. She was furious. She said I was destroying the family and turning Kendra against her. She said I was selfish and manipulative just like my father. She called me ungrateful after everything she'd done for me. She said I was going to regret this when the judge saw through my lies and sent me home. I didn't say anything back. I just hung up and blocked her number. Biodad asked if I was okay. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The next morning, Mark sent me a text. It was long and said he was sorry for not standing up for me. He claimed he didn't realize how bad things had gotten. He said he should have taken me to the hospital right away instead of stopping at Best Buy. He said he hoped I could forgive him someday. Biodad was reading over my shoulder while I stared at the message. He made this snorting sound and said, "Adults don't get credit for ignoring child abuse." He said Mark had 16 years to notice how they treated me and chose not to care until there were legal consequences. I didn't respond to the message. I just deleted it and put my phone away. The custody hearing happened 5 weeks later in a courthouse that smelled like old wood and floor cleaner. Biodad and I sat at a table on the left side, while Mom, Mark, and their lawyer sat on the right. Kendra was out in the hallway waiting to testify. The judge was a woman with gray hair pulled back tight and reading glasses on a chain. She looked at me when Biodad's lawyer called my name, and I walked up to the witness stand on shaky legs. My incision still pulled when I moved too fast. The lawyer asked me to describe what happened the day I went to the hospital, and I told her everything. The shooting pain in math class, texting the family group chat, waiting 30 minutes for pickup, throwing up in the car, asking to go to the hospital. Mom and Mark deciding to stop at Best Buy instead, being locked in the car while they shopped for a phone charger, feeling my appendix rupture while I watched them through the store window comparing products, blacking out, waking up 3 days later in the ICU. The lawyer asked how my family usually treated me compared to Kendra, and I explained the differential treatment. The Disney vacation I wasn't invited to. The car Kendra got for her 16th birthday while I got a card with $20. How Mom always looked at me with this expression like I disgusted her. How Mark called me dramatic whenever I was sick or hurt. The judge took notes and asked me directly if I felt safe with Biodad. I said yes, without hesitating. She asked if I wanted to go back to Mom's house, and I said no. Mom's lawyer tried to make me seem like I was exaggerating, but the medical records were right there showing exactly how sick I'd been. When I stepped down, my legs were shaking, so bad Biodad had to steady me. Kendra went next, and she was already crying before the lawyer even asked the first question. She described the Best Buy stop in detail, how I'd been throwing up, how my skin looked gray, how I'd begged them to go straight to the hospital, how Mom said it would just take a second to grab a charger, how long they actually spent in the store. The lawyer asked if our parents treated us differently, and Kendra nodded. She talked about getting a car while I got nothing, about family vacations I wasn't included in, about how Mom and Mark always acted like I was a burden while she was the favorite. She said they treated me worse because I looked exactly like Biodad, and Mom hated him. She was sobbing through most of it, and I could see Mom glaring at her from across the courtroom with this look that would have made me feel guilty if I was Kendra. But Kendra kept talking anyway. She said she was sorry for not speaking up sooner and that she should have called an ambulance herself that day. When she finished, Mom's lawyer tried to make it seem like Kendra was just a dramatic teenager, but the judge looked skeptical. Dr. Burns testified after lunch. He brought my medical file and explained my condition when I arrived at the emergency room. Critical sepsis from a ruptured appendix, severe dehydration, dangerously high fever, blood pressure dropping. He said another 30 minutes of delay could have been fatal. The lawyer asked how long my appendix had been ruptured before I got to the hospital, and he said at least 2 hours based on the level of infection. He described the emergency surgery and the 3 days I spent in a coma. Then he talked about the implications of the treatment delay. He said stopping for a phone charger when a child is showing clear signs of a medical emergency demonstrated reckless disregard for my welfare. Mom's lawyer tried to argue that they didn't know how serious it was, but Dr. Burns shut that down. He said I was vomiting, sweating, gray, and in obvious severe pain. Any reasonable adult would have gone straight to the hospital. The judge asked if there was any medical justification for the delay, and Dr. Burns said absolutely not. Valerie testified next and brought a thick folder of documentation. She explained that hospital staff had raised concerns about my family's behavior during my ICU stay, how Mom and Mark lied about being there constantly when they actually only visited twice, how they lied about the pharmacy stop, how I'd expressed fear about going home. She described the contrast between Mom's household and Biodad's care during my recovery. Biodad had followed all medical instructions perfectly. He checked my incision twice daily, made sure I took medications on schedule. kept detailed records of my symptoms and healing progress, brought me to every follow-up appointment. She said I'd gained weight, and my stress markers had improved significantly since leaving Mom's house. The lawyer asked about her professional assessment, and Valerie said clearly that I had experienced medical neglect that endangered my life and ongoing emotional abuse through differential treatment. She recommended I not return to Mom's household. Mom's lawyer stood up and tried to argue this was just one mistake, an isolated incident of poor judgment under stress, not a pattern of abuse. But Biodad's lawyer pulled out the accumulated evidence. Medical records showing I was underweight and malnourished. School counselor reports about my deteriorating condition. Social work documentation of the differential treatment. Even Kendra's testimony about years of favoritism. The judge reviewed everything silently for what felt like forever. Then she spoke. She said the evidence painted a clear picture of ongoing neglect and that the Best Buy incident was just the most dramatic example. She granted Biodad temporary custody for 6 months with supervised visitation for Mom. She ordered family therapy for Mom, Mark, and Kendra, individual therapy for me, another hearing in 6 months to review the situation. Mom stood up so fast her chair scraped loud against the floor. She walked out without looking at me, and Mark followed right behind her. Kendra stayed sitting for a minute looking lost before getting up slowly. Biodad squeezed my shoulder, and I realized I was crying, but not sad crying, relief crying. That weekend, Biodad and I loaded my stuff into his car and drove 2 states away to his house. It took 6 hours, and we stopped twice for food and bathroom breaks. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw a small 3-bedroom ranch with white siding and a big yard. Biodad led me inside and down the hallway to the 3rd bedroom. He opened the door, and I just stood there staring. There was a new bed with a blue comforter, a desk with a lamp and a cup full of pens, a bookshelf already assembled against one wall, curtains on the window, a rug on the floor. Everything was new and clean and set up specifically for me. No one had ever made space for me like this before. I started crying again, and Biodad hugged me. He said this was my room, and I could decorate it however I wanted. Make it mine. I couldn't even talk. I just nodded against his shoulder. Starting at a new school 6 weeks into the semester was weird. Everyone already had their friend groups and inside jokes, and I was just the random new kid who showed up in October. But I didn't care. I was so relieved to be away from my old life that the awkwardness didn't bother me. Kian and I texted every day, and he sent me pictures of what was happening at our old school. He promised to visit during spring break. My teachers were all really understanding about my situation. The principal had told them I was recovering from major surgery and dealing with a family situation, so they gave me extensions on assignments and let me leave class if I needed to. Nobody asked too many questions. I started therapy the 2nd week at my new school. Biodad found a counselor who worked specifically with family trauma cases. Her office was in a building downtown and had comfortable chairs and tissues on every table. She asked me to tell her my story, and I did. All of it. The years of being treated like I didn't matter. The appendix rupture. The Best Buy stop. Everything. She listened without interrupting, and then said something that hit me hard. She said my mother's issues with Biodad were never my fault. That I didn't deserve to be punished for looking like him. That the neglect I experienced was abuse, even if it wasn't physical. We met every week, and she gave me tools for processing the anger and hurt. It was hard work. Some sessions I left feeling worse than when I arrived. But slowly, I started feeling less angry and more at peace. Like maybe I could actually move forward instead of staying stuck in all the bad years. Biodad signed us up for family therapy too. He said he wanted to build a real relationship after missing my entire childhood. We went together every other week to a different counselor who specialized in parent-child relationships. We talked about why he and Mom split up, how she'd refused to let him have contact with me, how he'd paid child support for 16 years but never got to see me. He showed me court documents from when I was little where he'd tried to get visitation rights, but Mom blocked it every time. He said his biggest regret was not fighting harder, not pushing through the legal system until he could be part of my life. I told him about growing up thinking he didn't want me, how Mom always said he'd abandoned us, how I'd believed her lies for 16 years. We both cried during that session. The counselor said we needed to grieve the relationship we should have had while building the one we could have now. It wasn't going to be perfect. Biodad had missed my whole childhood and we were basically strangers, but he was trying, really trying, and that mattered more than I could put into words. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Biodad asked if I wanted to meet his parents, my grandparents, the ones I'd never known existed because Mom told me Biodad's whole family wanted nothing to do with me. I said yes before I could overthink it. They drove down from 3 hours away on Thanksgiving morning, and when they pulled into the driveway, I watched from the window as an older couple got out of a blue sedan. My grandmother had gray hair and glasses, and she was crying before she even reached the front door. My grandfather was tall like Biodad and me, with the same dark hair going silver at the edges. Bio-dad opened the door, and my grandmother pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. She kept saying my name over and over and touching my face like she needed to make sure I was real. My grandfather hugged me next, and his hands were shaking. They came inside, and my grandmother immediately started pulling photo albums from a canvas bag she'd brought. She spread them across the coffee table and pointed to pictures of Bio-dad as a kid. The resemblance was crazy. Same eyes, same smile, same way of standing with hands in pockets. She showed me Bio-dad at my age, and we could have been twins. My grandfather kept pointing out little details like how we both had the same cowlick in our hair and the same crooked pinky fingers. They asked me questions about school and what I liked to do, and actually listened to my answers. During dinner, my grandmother cried again and apologized for not knowing I existed. She explained that Mom had blocked every attempt they made to contact me after the split. They'd sent birthday cards and Christmas presents for years, but everything got returned. They tried to get legal visitation rights, but Mom's lawyer kept blocking it. My grandfather's face got red when he talked about what happened with my appendix. He wanted to know why no one had called the police or pressed charges. Bio-dad explained the legal process was complicated and that getting me safe was the priority. My grandmother said she wished she'd known sooner, so she could have helped. She made me promise to call her anytime I needed anything. Before they left that evening, my grandfather slipped $200 into my hand and told me to buy something I wanted. My grandmother hugged me again and said they'd be back for Christmas. Kendra called me in early December. Her name popped up on my phone and I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She asked if we could talk and her voice sounded different, less bratty, more tired. She said she'd started therapy after everything that happened and was working through a lot of stuff about Mom and Mark. We talked for over an hour. She brought up things from our childhood I'd tried to forget, how Mom would make her favorite meals but tell me we were out of groceries, how she got new clothes for school but I wore the same stuff from last year, how they took her to the movies but left me home alone. She said she used to think it was normal because that's how it always was, but her therapist helped her see it wasn't okay, that she'd been taught to see me as less important, and she'd gone along with it without questioning. She cried on the phone and apologized for the Best Buy stop, for not speaking up in the car when I was literally dying, for caring more about her phone than my life. I didn't know what to say at first. I told her I wasn't ready to forgive Mom and Mark. Maybe I never would be, but I didn't hate her. She was raised in the same messed up house I was, just from the other side. She got the favoritism, and I got the neglect, and both of us got damaged by it. She said she understood and didn't expect me to forgive her right away. Then she told me she was planning to go to college as far from home as possible. She'd applied to schools in other states and was hoping for scholarships. She couldn't stay in that house anymore now that she saw it clearly. The 6-month custody review got scheduled for late March. My therapist submitted a report about my progress that Bio-dad let me read. She wrote that I showed significant improvement in mental health since leaving Mom's house, that I was more open in sessions, less guarded, sleeping better, eating regularly. She noted I'd gained 12 pounds since moving in with Bio-dad, and my stress levels had gone down. Dr. Burns sent updated medical records showing my surgical site had healed perfectly, and my overall health markers had gotten way better. My blood pressure was normal now. The chronic headaches I used to get were gone. Bio-dad's lawyer put together a huge file of evidence. Stable housing with my own bedroom, perfect school attendance since transferring, report cards showing my grades went from C's and D's to A's and B's, letters from my therapist, my school counselor, even my grandparents, photos of my room and the house, bank statements showing Bio-dad's steady income and child support payments he'd made for 16 years, a timeline of every doctor's appointment and therapy session since I moved in. Mom's lawyer had a lot less to work with. She'd completed some therapy sessions, but her therapist's report was pretty basic. It said she was working on processing the custody situation, but didn't show much insight into her behavior. There was no mention of her acknowledging the neglect or taking responsibility for the Best Buy stop. The hearing happened on a cold Tuesday morning in late March. Bio-dad drove us to the courthouse, and my grandparents met us in the parking lot. Inside the courtroom, I sat at a table with Bio-dad and his lawyer. Mom sat across the aisle with her lawyer. Mark was there too, but Kendra wasn't. The judge was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and reading glasses. She reviewed all the submitted documents first, taking her time with each report. Then she asked to hear testimony. Bio-dad's lawyer called me up first. I walked to the witness stand and swore to tell the truth. This time I felt different from the temporary hearing, more confident, more sure. The lawyer asked me to describe my living situation with biological father. I explained that I had my own room that I decorated how I wanted, that Bio-dad made sure I ate 3 meals a day and had clean clothes and got to the school on time, that he took me to all my doctor appointments and therapy sessions, that he helped with homework and asked about my day, that I felt safe there, The lawyer asked about my health and I said I'd gained weight and didn't get headaches anymore, that I slept through the night now without nightmares. The judge asked me directly if I wanted to return to my mother's house. I looked right at her and said no. She asked if I'd be willing to have visits with Mom eventually, and I said honestly, I didn't know. Maybe someday, but not now. Mom's lawyer tried to ask me questions about missing my family and my old school, but I just kept saying I was happier now, healthier now, safer now. The judge took a 15-minute break to review everything. When she came back, she said she'd made her decision. She granted Bio-Dad full legal and physical custody. She said that at 16, my preferences carried a lot of weight, and it was clear I was thriving in his care. She noted that Mom had failed to acknowledge the seriousness of her neglect, and that made her think it could happen again. The medical evidence of delayed treatment was really concerning to her. She said I could have contact with Mom if and when I chose to, but there would be no forced visitation. Mom could petition for supervised visits in the future if she completed more therapy and showed real progress. But for now, I got to stay with Bio-Dad permanently. Mom's face went red, and she got up and walked out before the judge even finished talking. Mark stayed in his seat looking at the floor. Bio-Dad squeezed my shoulder, and my grandparents were crying happy tears behind us. The lawyer shook Bio-Dad's hand and told him congratulations. We signed some papers, and then we left. Mom didn't attend the final part of the hearing when the judge signed the official custody order. She just sent her lawyer. Mark was there in the back row, but he didn't try to talk to me or even look at me. After we left the courthouse, Kendra texted me. She said Mom was at home devastated and crying, that she was blaming Bio-Dad and the lawyers and the judge and everyone except herself, that she kept saying I'd been turned against her and poisoned by Bio-Dad's family. Kendra said she tried to tell Mom that none of this would have happened if she'd just taken me to the hospital that day, but Mom wouldn't hear it. I texted back that I was sorry Kendra had to deal with that it wasn't her job to make Mom see reality. Kendra said she was counting down the days until she could leave for college. I felt sad reading her messages, but I didn't feel guilty. This was Mom's choice, all of it. The years of treating me like I didn't matter, the Best Buy stop, the lies to the hospital staff, the refusal to take any responsibility. She could have fixed this at any point, but she chose not to. Spring break came in April, and Kian visited for 4 days. Bio-Dad picked him up from the bus station, and Kian gave me a huge hug in the parking lot. He kept looking around at everything like he was taking notes. Bio-Dad took us to a theme park the first day, and we went on every roller coaster twice. Kian kept saying how different I seemed, more relaxed, actually smiling and laughing. He said at our old school I always looked tense and tired, like I was waiting for something bad to happen. Now I looked like a normal teenager having fun. The second day we just hung out at the house playing video games and eating pizza. Kian met my grandparents when they stopped by for dinner, and afterward he told me I was lucky to have them now, that it was cool seeing adults actually care about me. The third day we went to the movies and walked around downtown. Kian talked about stuff happening at our old school, and it felt like hearing about a different life. A life I used to live, but didn't anymore. On the last day before Kian had to leave, we sat in my room and he said he was really glad things worked out, that he'd been worried about me for years, but didn't know how to help. I told him that texting me every day after the surgery and visiting the hospital meant more than he knew, that having one person who actually cared made a huge difference. Bio-Dad drove Kian back to the bus station and we promised to stay in touch. Watching him leave made me a little sad, but mostly I just felt grateful. Grateful that I had a real friend. Grateful that I had Bio-Dad and my grandparents. Grateful that I got out of that house before it destroyed me completely. With the custody case behind me, I started looking at my report card differently. My grades had jumped from mostly C's and D's to straight B's with a few A's mixed in. The school counselor called me in one afternoon and pulled up a college search website on her computer. She asked what I wanted to study, and I realized I'd never thought about it before, because college felt like something that happened to other people. We spent an hour looking at schools within an hour of Bio-Dad's house, comparing programs and scholarship deadlines. She printed out a list of 10 possibilities and said we'd work on applications together starting in fall. The email from Jasmine Ford came on a Tuesday morning before school. She wrote that she was glad the court case ended with me somewhere safe. She said she'd presented my situation at a district-wide training about recognizing family neglect and taking student reports seriously. Reading that made something shift in my chest. The worst thing that ever happened to me might actually help another kid someday. I wrote back thanking her for believing me when it mattered most. Summer hit in late May, and I needed something to do besides sitting around Bio-Dad's house. He helped me put together a resume, even though I'd never had a real job before. The bookstore downtown had a help wanted sign in the window. The manager hired me on the spot to work the register and restock shelves 4 days a week. My coworkers were mostly college students home for summer. They invited me to their movie nights and park hangouts. I was building actual friendships with people who didn't know anything about my past, unless I chose to tell them. Kendra's graduation happened in early June. She texted me a photo of herself in her cap and gown standing between Mom and Mark. Then she sent another message saying she got accepted to a state university 8 hours away from their house. Her voice sounded different on the phone when she called that night. Lighter somehow. She asked if she could visit me and Bio Dad before college started in August. I said yes without checking with him first because I knew he wouldn't mind. The letter came through Mom's lawyer in mid-June. It was formal and carefully worded, asking if I would consider meeting her for coffee with a therapist present to facilitate conversation. Bio Dad handed it to me without commentary and said the choice was completely mine. I sat with it for 3 days before bringing it up in my therapy session. My therapist asked what I hoped to gain from seeing Mom, and I couldn't come up with an answer. I wrote back through Bio Dad's lawyer that I wasn't ready and might never be. Kendra showed up on a Saturday in late July with 2 suitcases and a nervous smile. Bio Dad shook her hand at the door and invited her in like she was any normal guest. They sat in the living room while I made sandwiches in the kitchen. I could hear them talking about the custody case. Kendra's voice cracked when she apologized for all the years she went along with how Mom treated me. Bio Dad told her she was just a kid too and shouldn't carry guilt for her parents' choices. When I brought the food out, Kendra's eyes were red, but she looked calmer than I'd seen her in months. The camping trip happened the second week of August. Bio Dad loaded up his truck with tents and sleeping bags and drove us 3 hours north to meet my grandparents at a state park. We set up camp near a lake and spent 2 days swimming and hiking. That second night around the campfire, my grandfather started telling stories about Bio Dad's childhood. He said I got my stubborn streak from both sides of the family. Then he looked at me seriously and said that stubbornness saved my life because I refused to let Mom's neglect get swept under the rug like it was nothing. My grandmother squeezed my hand and said she wished she'd known about me sooner, but was grateful for every day moving forward. Senior year started the Tuesday after Labor Day. I walked into school with actual confidence for the first time ever. My schedule was packed with classes I'd chosen myself instead of whatever fit around Kendra's activities. I made the honor roll first quarter, and my teachers started writing college recommendation letters. My therapist noticed the change during our October session. She said I'd made remarkable progress over the past year and asked if I wanted to reduce our meetings from weekly to every other week. I agreed, because I was genuinely happy most days, instead of just surviving. Kendra called from her dorm room in late September. She said college was harder than high school, but better, because nobody there knew her as Mom's perfect daughter. She'd started seeing a campus therapist twice a week. Then she asked if we could be real siblings now without our parents' dysfunction wedged between us. I told her we could try to, that I meant it. She said that was enough for now. The college acceptance letters started arriving in March. I got into 3 schools near Bio Dad with decent financial aid packages. One offered enough scholarship money that I'd only need to take out small loans. I brought the letters home and spread them on the kitchen table. Bio Dad read each one carefully, and then his eyes got wet. He said he was proud of me and grateful he got to be part of my future after missing so much of my past. I picked the school with the best financial aid package, and we drove there the next weekend to tour the campus and submit my enrollment deposit. The decision felt right the second I clicked submit on the enrollment form. Bio Dad printed out the acceptance letter and hung it on the fridge next to my last report card. My grandparents called that evening and said they wanted to help with college costs. They transferred money into an account Bio Dad set up for books and supplies. We spent the next weekend driving to furniture stores and looking at mini fridges and desk lamps. Bio Dad made a list on his phone of everything I'd need and checked off items as we loaded them into his truck. I picked out bedding in dark blue and gray because it felt more grown up than the cartoon sheets I'd had at Mom's house. The shopping trip took 6 hours, and we stopped for burgers on the way home. Bio Dad asked if I was nervous about starting college, and I told him I was excited instead. He smiled and said that was exactly how it should feel. Graduation day arrived on a Saturday in late May. I woke up early and put on the cap and gown that had been hanging in my closet for 2 weeks. Bio Dad drove me to the school, and we met my grandparents in the parking lot. Kendra showed up 20 minutes later looking tired from her drive. Kian found us in the crowd and gave me a fist bump before heading to sit with his family. The ceremony started at 10, and I sat with my class in folding chairs on the football field. When they called my name, I walked across the stage and shook the principal's hand. I could hear Kian yelling from the bleachers and saw Bio Dad standing up to take pictures. Mom and Mark weren't there because I never sent them an invitation. I didn't feel bad about it. This day belonged to the people who actually showed up for me. After the ceremony, we took photos by the school sign and went out for lunch at a steakhouse. My grandmother kept touching my arm like she needed to make sure I was real. Summer started the Monday after graduation, and I got hired at a bookstore near Bio Dad's house. I worked 40 hours a week shelving books and running the register. The paychecks went into my college account, and I watched the balance grow every 2 weeks. On weekends, Bio Dad and I fell into routines that felt normal instead of forced. Friday nights, we ordered pizza and watched movies on the couch. Sunday mornings, he made pancakes with chocolate chips, and we ate them while reading the newspaper. Most evenings, we took his dog for walks around the neighborhood. These simple things meant more than any big gesture because they were consistent and real. Moving day came on a humid August morning. Bio Dad loaded boxes into his truck while I did a final check of my room. We drove 40 minutes to campus and parked outside my dorm building. It took 3 trips to carry everything upstairs to my room on the 2nd floor. Bio Dad helped me set up the bed and arrange my desk by the window. When everything was unpacked, he stood in the doorway looking around. He hugged me and said he was sorry for missing so many years, but grateful for every day moving forward. I told him he saved my life by showing up at that hospital. We both knew it was true. I finally had a real family and a future worth living for. That's my side of the story. Now I want to hear yours, because everyone sees things differently. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading through them later.